So emotions very often fall in metaphysics, even though we have some measurement for it. Like we don't really have a way to measure how much grief someone's carrying. So until we do, it will stay in metaphysics, and then it'll move into physics after that, after we have better understanding of how deep this emotion of grief sits in our nervous system, and how it affects us in our decision making in our life in general. I want to go back, Suzanne, to when you lost your son. When we're looking at friends and family, how did they process what was happening, and how did you process how they showed up for you or perhaps couldn't show up for you in those moments?
I think this navigation of friends and family is one of the trickiest parts because, especially in our grief illiterate society and culture, with all the fear and the not knowing and this lack of skills, people don't know how to show up. That's what I hear from people all the time. The messages I get regularly: oh, my friend's Aunt Sally died. I don't know what to do. What do I do? What do I say? And so now, in hindsight, I can look back and understand. And I knew at the time too, but it lands a different way for me now. I understand that everybody did the best that they knew how.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was incredibly painful.
Yeah.
Because weirdly, people who I expected based on our relationship until that point, that I expected to step in and really be there for me, that I thought were, emotionally evolved and whatever I thought I needed, disappeared.
Yeah.
And people I didn't necessarily expect stepped in. And the people who disappeared, it was really painful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I get that, especially I have a number of circles of women friends. Some of them came together because of our kids. So their children are the same ages as mine. And I get that that would have hit very close to home.
Yeah.
And been very hard to show up for the bigness of the messy that I was, because I was a big, messy, griefy person. And that's what I needed to survive. And I know for a lot of people, that was really scary. I can see now how scary that would be if you're thinking, well, but what if that happened to me is part of your thought process? And then, holy cow, that's really big and scary. And I don't quite know what to do to help. And I don't want to harm anybody.
Ooh.
Five is to not harm.
So what's the instinct then? If I don't want to harm somebody, what becomes the instinct?
I'm going to pull away. Because if I don't interact, I can't harm.
Yeah.
And the problem is that pulling away is harmful. And it's the opposite of what we're trying to do. And I got that at the time on some levels, and I absolutely get it now with all the work and research and, training and coaching I've done in those intervening 5 years, and especially in the last 2. But at the time, that was incredibly painful. It was so hurtful. And I know that it was people not wanting to hurt me that ended up hurting me. And I think, and we'll talk about this more, but part of the biggest issue, I think, besides the skill gap and the lack of understanding and knowledge and all of that, which we can fix, right? We can learn new skills. We are very smart beings. It's that piece that feels like judgment. And whether it is or isn't, you don't necessarily know unless the person is saying you're doing this all wrong, and then they're judging. But it's not generally that obvious, but it often feels to the griever like they're doing something wrong. So here's a great example. For me, one of the things that remains 5 years later really hard to navigate is birthdays. Either Ben's or mine. I now can navigate my daughter's because one wise person said to me at the 1 year mark, so Ben's death day and my daughter's birthday are 4 days apart. And in those intervening 2 days is my dad's birthday and my dad's death day. So this is a very complicated 4 days in my year. So I now can navigate her birthday, but navigating mine is still really hard. And that first year after Ben died, so my birthday is at the end of August, he died at the end of September. So we weren't even through a full year yet. And I was very clear that I did not want to celebrate my birthday. I had no ability to celebrate anything. And acknowledging those time markers that meant I was now further away from when he was here were still excruciatingly painful. And one of my family members was very determined that we should get together for my birthday, because what I needed was to get together with people in their version of reality, not what I needed at all. And I said, I love that. I love that you want to see us. I love that you want to get together, but I am not acknowledging my birthday this year. I'm not. I need to be doing just what's right for me. I can't be feeling beholden to anybody else. And they said, well, what if we just get together and you can pretend it's not your birthday, but we will be celebrating your birthday? And I was like, no, still no. And it's that sense somehow that we know what would be good for you and we want to help. I know that came from wanting to help me. But when we are so convinced that our helping is the right helping, that we fail to hear what the other person is saying, that's when the harm happens.
I want to ask a question in this, because you talked about the skill sets.
Yeah.
Do you think that in the lack of capacity to hold space for you,
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to adjust their comfort. They wanted you to adjust your behavior to meet their needs of comfort in an uncomfortable situation.
100%.
And
100%.
do we talk about that in society enough, about how to hold space for someone so that our discomfort does not overshadow our friends' needs?
We don't talk about it enough. And from my clients, from my folks that are grieving that are clients of mine, I hear versions of that all the time. Right? They don't want to talk to their family because they don't want to be a burden. The family changes the topic. Their friends can't hold they're not necessarily saying they can't hold the space.
Mm-hmm.
What their feeling is that when they want to bring up their loved one, everyone is uncomfortable. And that's also conditioning. If you think about all those cliches and platitudes, all of the they would want you to be happy, they're in a better place, all of those, when you really think about them, the subtext is, I am uncomfortable with your grief and I would like it to go away now.
Yes, yes, that is the bold statement there.
Right? That's the subtext. I am uncomfortable. I don't like being uncomfortable. I will need for you to stop grieving. And that's just what I need.
Mm-hmm.
And I
It's no longer
understand.
about you. It's no longer about you having the support that you need to heal on your journey.
The message that grievers get subtly in that subtext over and over again is your grief is not welcome here,
Mm-hmm.
which then translates because of all of our, and you could talk about this much better than I can, but all of our old trauma and stories and wounding translates into you are not welcome here.
Yes.
Because there's a point in grief, especially I found that that was all I was. And I knew that wasn't the reality, and I knew that wasn't forever, but all I could do was grieve. So if grief was unwelcome, there was no space for me in that place. Because my lived experience at the time was that everything was about grief. That's all I could do. I could grieve and a few very small things, but my focus was on the grief. So then the messaging that we get,
Secondary.
yeah, then the
You have the
messaging,
primary grief, and then you got the secondary grief of not being having your needs met.
yeah, and
Adding to
having your
the
friends and family disappear and
yeah.
disappoint you, and those circles all shift, and then everything feels like quicksand. Nothing feels solid anymore, right? And that's why I love that this one is about like it's really shifting and rocking the shape of your world. So we've been through, the foundation is cracking, and now we're at, well, how do I even fit into the world anymore? And then for me, what happened over time was those people that weren't able to show up completely without shame or blame, I had to really reassess where those people fit now in my life. Because if I really wanted people in my life that could have big emotional conversations and really dig into the deep stuff, and they had indicated that they couldn't at that moment, and I always leave the door open. You're welcome to come back. Everyone gets a million chances, almost everyone, as best I'm able as my imperfect human, right? But then I had to really reevaluate, well, how much time do I want to invest in this relationship? How much effort am I putting into this relationship? And those concentric circles of people in my life that get my attention and energy really shifted. People came in from the outside and went from the inner circle to the hinterlands in ways that I hadn't expected and hadn't experienced before. And I know now are very normal.
Yeah, major life events shift. It shifts every ripple.
Yeah.
Every layer of belonging shifts when we experience a major life event, especially when it's this large of a major life event.
Yeah.
We look at major life events as moving or transitioning out of the military, but then there are also these grand level major life events, and it's hard not to have those ripples then shift
Yeah.
and settle in different places. So I want to look at current events. I'd say the past 10 years, because there are a lot of people who may not experience the loss of a loved one with the depth that you have.
Mm-hmm.
But we're certainly seeing it in our society right now. You're in Canada, I'm down in Las Vegas in the United States. But it's palpable regardless.
Everywhere. It's
Everywhere.
global. Yep.
It is global.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I said goodbye to a lot of friends because of where I stand with social injustice and my values with uh, more of the social worker perspective of we are obligated as humans, as stewards of our community, to take care of the people in our community. And there's been a lot of shock that I've had to take in of grief of saying goodbye to friends that I didn't realize had values that didn't make it safe for everyone in the community. So that caught me off guard. That had a deep grief of having this intimate, close friendship, and then finding that the values were not aligned when I thought they were.
Yeah.
That was a bit difficult to process. Um, and I don't want to make comparisons as if there's a value point system of grand major life event to
Mm.
seasonal life events, because grief in everyone's body settles differently, and the importance is that we honor the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to take a little bit of time and talk about what of current events, grief that's occurring in current events, if we could.
Yeah. For me, and it's partly because Ben died in September 2020. So during all of the COVID, chaos and shenanigans, that was the summer of George Floyd's murder. That was the summer that Australia was on fire. Like the world was not a very fun place. It was really, really awful. We were going through a big, as we're seeing again, right, this big global energy shift and transition. And what really struck me at the time, and I actually think we're seeing that playing out now, what was happening in the media and in the conversations with people was all this talk about getting back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see so clearly, like normal, quote unquote, doesn't exist anymore. And it wasn't all that great for everybody anyway. So why would we want to get back there? Like I was very clear that I didn't want to get back to that version of normal because it had been laid bare for us in ways it hadn't been before, how much the system didn't serve everybody. And I think that this push to get back to normal and this fear of those big emotions that really we should have all been feeling about everything we lost since then, I think that repressed grief and trauma is what we're seeing play out now, where, in my opinion, in many places, the wounded boys are running the world.
Oh, yes.
It's like these wounded young boys, like that have not gotten over that wounding. And our wounding that we have not gotten over means that we are listening and elevating and valuing those opinions and ideas, which when we as a collective are more healed and centered and grounded in our own knowing, we would not be elevating those voices. So this is this collective grief and woundedness that we have not, that needs to be healed as a collective. Like I can do everything I can, and I do, for myself, for the energetic, for the people I come into contact with and work with. But if we don't all get into that conversation, that woundedness will just continue to play out. And unfortunately, in this moment, Canada feels fairly secure and safe at the moment, but we've all seen that is a moment-to-moment thing, and we've seen it play out all over the world. That woundedness is part of, I think, what's playing out in our division. Not in the breakdown of systems and stuff that's happening, because I actually think that's a transformation that needs to happen. And as hard as it is to watch, I think it's a bit of a necessary. But the way that we are navigating it as fellow humans on the planet that we all share and need to keep alive, with the divisiveness and the inability to even have those conversations. Like I'm in my late 50s. Wow, that sounds weird. I was going to say I'm 58. That doesn't feel as awkward as late 50s. Anyway, So I have lived through many different political movements, many different things, and this is the first time where it's felt like when we have a difference of opinion, we can't talk about it. Because I feel like your worldview actually creates a lack of safety that you were talking about.
Yes.
And if your view creates a lack of safety and you can't even hear me say that and be curious about whether that might be true and who that might be impacting, I don't know what conversation we have. And then now I'm grieving that.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So it's all these layers and layers and layers that in the collective are happening on top of and concurrent with all our personal griefs and losses.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a big soupy mess of grief and we're still scared to talk about it.
Yes. And what we're seeing is we're seeing the shield of anger come in front of the grief.
Yes.
So it's coming out as this act of anger, but anger is really the shield protecting that soft turtle belly of grief. And so what we're seeing appears to be a lot of anger.
Yeah.
But it is indeed grief behind the anger that is so vulnerable and undigestible because we don't have the language to place the experience, to place during the pandemic, and we'll be talking about the pandemic later in the series. Many people lost loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't have funeral services or religious services in the same way they could years prior. And so there's an incomplete cycle of grieving that is still lingering, of a family member that didn't get a full goodbye.
Yeah.
And then we've got shifts in jobs, and all of these pieces are our work family. And then it became remote, and there was a loss of that daily reassurance of human connection that we lost, and that got added. And we're not labeling these things. There's not awareness to it yet to be able to say, this is how big your grief jar is.
Yeah.
And so in that lack of language, we're now experiencing this. I can't talk to you. I can't trust you. I don't know who you are. It's a very interesting dynamic right now. And it does come back to a lot of grief.
Mm-hmm. And I love that what's coming to me is such a clear visual of, like, if you think about sort of a turtle or something where they have a hard shell and then a soft underbelly, right now what's happening is we're all banging our hard shells together.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no room there for communication, right? There's no room there. There's no flexibility. There's no adjustability, compromise. None of that's there. It's all on the mushy belly side.
Yeah. And the head is tucked in. It's like, I don't see you. I can't hear you. There's no.
So true. And the problem, I think, when we get this to this place where that conversation now feels unsafe, is we have no choice but to put on our armor. Because if what's out there isn't safe, I have to protect myself. Our system is designed to protect us. But what we really need is the courage and the bravery and the safe spaces where we can start to, just turn this far and see if that's safe, or turn that far, so that eventually we can get to the place again where we're heart to heart, soft belly to soft belly, connecting as humans with a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of movements where I did not agree with what they were doing, and we had a difference of opinion, but we have always been able to talk about it. And whether we could convince, it wasn't even about convincing the other person. It was about just listening and going, that is so fascinating. I don't think that at all. And so isn't that interesting? But we're so defensive right now because so much doesn't feel safe. And I think the other thing that's happening is the systems and the structure, and we'll get to this in a future week, are shifting so fast that our internal systems can't keep up. No. And that also feels unsafe. So it's like grief on top of grief on top of grief on top of lack of safety on top of lack of safety on top of lack of safety. That's why we're where we are now, in my humble opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about Canada. in the United States, at least in Las Vegas, we had a really difficult 2008, 2009 housing crisis because we're such a tourist dependent community. So when the housing crisis came, and then everything got, it got very unsettled, and the ground was very earthquake uneven.
Mm-hmm.
Then it took people a couple years to get resettled, and then we had the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the political shifts. So
Yeah.
we've got nervous systems that have been dysregulated for at least 10, 12, 15 years.
Yeah.
And that's a lot for the human system to handle without knowing what's safe. And usually it would be our friends and our family that come around and create that support system.
Mm-hmm.
That important layer that's like, okay, let's tend and befriend, let's settle each other. But if we've got now conflict, or we've got estrangement, or we've got loss because of emotional incapacity, now that creates a different level of unsteadiness. The ground under our feet, it's still not settled. And it starts to produce as physical ailments because we don't have language. We can't get resolution. That sense of helplessness of wanting a steady ground and not having that friend and family support system can create a very unintended consequence, magnified by the number of people experiencing it.
Yeah. Yes. That's so interesting. I hadn't really, like, I kind of try and help encourage people to think like from 2020 on, like that's such a marker in our lives. We didn't have the same housing crisis here because we have different mortgage regulations. So we'd never had the subprime mortgage concept, which created so much of that crisis. We've had other economic, ebbs and flows as the system does. That's so interesting to think about. This is decades of dysregulation.
Yeah.
Because
and it's different because
and
it's not a war.
Yeah.
Labeled it as a war. There's no war. So when there's no war, there's no frame around it of this is the beginning and this is the end.
Yeah.
Thing just kind of, it flowed from one to the other without any timeline constraints.
Yeah.
So even with the pandemic, and we'll get to that again, there was no official end date. Okay, it's now. So it just smudged into the next event, and then what happens is they all get, it's like they get added to the big soup. And now we've got all sorts of things that don't go together in this soup, and we're all being forced to drink it.
Yeah, and it's gross.
It's gross.
It's gross. That's so interesting because the sort of idea of friends and family too, which is the theme for this week, is when we could feel that bubble of safety around us, not in the sort of tribal sense that we're feeling now, where it's very demarcated, us versus them, but when it was like, I have this bubble of people who get me, who care about me, who have my back, who would be there if something went wrong. When that sort of security net and safety net starts to fracture, which I don't know a family that's not feeling that on some level, then we don't even have our kind of go-to bubble, right? Then we're really laid bare and feeling isolated and on our own to face the increasing, what my daughter calls chaos and shenanigans, right? Which makes it sound much lighter than it is because there's a whole lot of darkness happening. But, we're kind of more energetically even, I feel like, and I would love for you to speak to that, like that sense of, in the metaphysical sense, when that friends and family circle that we are connected with on that energetic level and that trust level and that emotional level starts to weaken and fracture and crumble, what does that mean for us individually on the metaphysical? And is there a way for us to easily, quickly, something, rebuild it? Like, what do we need to do in this moment besides sort of build the language and like all the practical things that I can help with? On the metaphysical level, is there something that even those of us who are sort of just adjacent to that understanding could be actively doing or thinking about or contemplating or understanding? What would you offer to us?
first I want to point out a couple of things. Our friends and our family are the ones that hug us.
Yeah.
And when we're hugged, when we're really hugged, not like social hug, but hugged like a parent that may not live with us, and adults with adult parents, the way they hug is with love. And so it produces oxytocin. It's our antidepressant system. So when we've got this friction in this separation, we're also losing our natural antidepressant, which is creating a different sort of response in our body. And when we lose our friends and our family, we're also losing our history. So time is impacted. Someone that we've had history with for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and we're separating, that history has a value in the metaphysical space. It has a measurable value. And when we look back at our teenage self valued the input of our friends over our family. So if we're now losing our input system that helped us make better decisions, we're now losing the system that's helping us move forward. And so then we look at it from the metaphysical perspective, and we look at the energetic field or the toroidal field that exists outside of our body, the electromagnetic field. It's coming in and it's condensing because we're no longer in that space where we feel safe and interwoven, like the mycelia of our human experience. We're no longer roots that are exchanging with each other. We've lost the invisible sources that helped feed us. So just like tree roots, they'll start to share, and then they'll reach out to grab water or other nutrients that may not be immediately in their root environment. The roots will start to grow in the direction to bring the resources in. But when we lose that ability to share, now we're creating more distortion in our energy field. Because we are, as humans, so much designed to be connected. Even the people who are in the rural Montana mountains, they're connected to nature. They're connected to the animals. They're still connected. They're feeding from each other. And when we lose our nutrient system, energetically speaking, we are dehydrating ourselves. And that creates more illness.
That makes so much sense to me. That just landed in my body in a way that I hadn't been able to hear that before. So thank you so much. I felt a little bit like I was putting on the spot. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna put her on the spot, but I know she can do it. That landed for me in a way that I had not understood before. That was so helpful. And I love you even talking about, folks up in rural areas where they're more connected to nature and the animals, but that connects them through that to me.
Yes.
Right? Because I'm connected to nature and the animals. And so through that, we're all connected. That's so interesting to think about. It's the literal, I don't know if there's a better word than entanglement. Entanglement doesn't have the positive connotation that I want, but it's the literal entanglement of our energies that's fraying. That then means we are not being fed by each other, and we're not doing that energetic exchange.
Yes.
And I wonder if that's part of the breakdown and the divisiveness, right? And that's how we're now feel like we're drifting further and further apart, because once those entanglements are detached, there's nothing energetically keeping us together.
And so what we do is we continue seeking for nutrients. And if nutrients is the big, loud voice telling us to be afraid, be scared, chaos, confusion, we start feeding on that. And that's how we get people that are stuck to a TV.
Yeah.
Because that becomes their source of nutrient. But nutritionally, it has zero value. It has a negative value.
Yeah. They're just eating Cocoa Puffs all day.
Cocoa Puffs. Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Cocoa Puffs work.
Fiesta, and nothing is being fed in the way that it needs to be fed.
Right.
That is so helpful, Annie. You have no idea. I mean, you do have an idea, but you have no idea. And so then what is our way back to each other when in this moment we are having to draw boundaries and lose relationships and release friendships where our values are now so not aligned, they're so disaligned that we can't, that this is now no longer a safe place for us?
I I think the first thought that came to me is going back to men.
Mm.
Men for generations now have been losing their men's circle.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really important that men had other men to go to, that the wife wasn't the wife wasn't playing multiple roles of best friend,
Yep.
mother, right? So all these components. The men's circles are really, really important. So and that'll be next week when we start talking about community, the impact of community. But here, these two layers are going to overlap a little bit, because if men have greater sense of connection with other men, it's alleviating the pressure on the women in the household, for those that are in, and it doesn't necessarily mean heterosexual households, but or friendships. It can be platonic
Mm-hmm.
in many ways, that there's now this skill set to go and seek out other men, for men to seek out other men to strengthen, and women are able to seek out other women to strengthen. And so
Mm-hmm.
it allows for opportunities to make friends that are in alignment with values, to refill. It's like going and finding, if we no longer have fruits and vegetables in our yard, we have to go find where to get those fruits and
Yeah.
vegetables. And
Yeah.
so being, for people to be active in communities, to establish friendships and relationships with other people, even if they have to start over and start the clock again with a new friend, or friends as family, we need to be constantly actively engaged in developing those relationships, because we know from the study of adult development that Harvard has been conducting for 90 something years, that those with greater social networks live longer, have better wellness.
Mm-hmm.
So for our survival, we need to have friendships. We need to have connections that we can trust. And we need to invest in those friendships just as much as we invest in our retirement, or we invest in our house. We have to invest in relationships. It carries a very large weight that we don't yet have the value for, and yet
Mm-hmm.
it's very heavy in maintaining our health.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important for us to remember. And to just remember that, I love your sense of, it doesn't have to be the people that carry that history. You can have some of those and some new ones and some medium length ones. And, not everyone is here for a lifetime, right? It's a reason, a season, or a lifetime. But we need all of those, and to value and be cultivating all of those. Because I think, especially in times like this, where everything feels unsettled, and certainly in times of big grief, we need multiple sets of resources. Right. And I had other circles of women that were absolutely capable of stepping in, holding that space for me. I could be a hot mess with them, and they were fine. And they were willing and happy to do that. And so you have to be cultivating actively people that serve different purposes in your life too. I love that analogy of thinking like, I have always felt in relationships, I never wanted a partner that was all things to me. And I never wanted to be all things to them, because it's an unrealistic expectation and it's not healthy. Like, our romantic partner should be our romantic partner. And yes, we want to have shared interests. We want to do fun things together, but they should not be our parent. They should not be our best friends. They should not, or our only best friend. I'm all about you being married to your best friend. If you are mad that I said you shouldn't be married to your best friend, please don't hear that. They should be a best friend of yours, but you should have multiple best friends outside of that relationship, so that there's no one relationship that carries that whole burden.
It's unrealistic. Even among our friends, not all of our friends have the emotional capacity. I
No,
have friends that they're my go travel friends. They're great travel friends. I can have great conversations about travel, but I'm not able to talk to them about grief.
right,
They don't have that capacity. And then I have friends where I can talk really deep emotional things, but then they're not the ones I invite out to have a glass of wine on a Friday night. That's
right.
not their role either. So it's also understanding what our needs are, like which fruits and vegetables we like,
Yeah.
and what we can make with those fruits and vegetables.
Yeah. And having that thoughtfulness and discernment, because then we can turn to the right people in a crisis. We're not going to turn necessarily to our Friday night wine friends in a crisis. Now, one of them might step in that we never expected. They might turn out to be a complete miracle in our life, but we wouldn't necessarily turn there for the kind of support that we need. And so it is that sense too of, all aspects of our life need feeding. Our fun muscle needs feeding. Our deep thinking muscle needs feeding. Our emotional resources need feeding. And it's an unrealistic ask to think there's one friend or one family member that can do all of that. If you have a bestie that can do all of that, you are very, very lucky. But for most of us, that's not the case. We have our bestie fun person and our bestie like deep conversation person, and we have a number of people that fill all of those roles. And that to me increases our ability to have multiple of those feeding, rich, nourishing connections. Because if we have one of them and that connection is severed for whatever reason, we're in a world of hurt.
Yes.
Right. And it's so funny. That's actually making me think when Ben was alive, I didn't know any of his friends. So we had moved quite like 40 minutes away. He didn't want any of the old friends. There's one or two he kept, but he made a whole new circle of friends. So not his childhood friends. I didn't know any of them. And I kept saying to him, like you can have friends over the house. Like I'll leave if you don't want me here, or I'll just be in my room or whatever. Like you can have people. Nope. It's okay. It's okay. And he had two very distinct circles of friends and I didn't know any of them. And I always thought that was a little bit strange. And when he died, I was sharing that with a friend of mine, and they said to me, to them, it actually made perfect sense. Because if you have anxiety, which Ben did, social anxiety, then you don't want everyone to be commingled. Because if this circle decides that they don't want you anymore, then you have nothing. So the sense that he wanted to keep me safe place, separated from this group of friends, another safe place, separated from this group of friends, another safe place, and these two circles separated from each other. His two best friends did not know each other until after he died.
Wow.
Because they were in different circles, because he kept everyone kind of siloed off from each other. But that's kind of a model for this sense of needing more than one source. Because even in his understanding of how he needed to be safe, his gifted brain had figured out that if he could keep separate safe places, he would always be safe. There would always be somewhere to turn. So how we then go forward in our lives with this idea of, okay, I actually do need more than this one special person or this one key person in my life. I need a few key people that play different roles and may step in or out of a crisis or a joyful experience, because the opposite end of sort of the crisis experience is the joyful experience, and not everybody can hold that either.
Very true.
Very true. Not knowing who's going to step in or out at either end of the sort of life spectrum, if we kind of have to view it that way, which at this point we kind of do, this is such a rich drop of understanding for me to be like, oh yeah, okay. Like we actively need to be cultivating all of those and valuing them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I think that is a perfect place for us to stop.
I think so too.
We're at our target time. I'm like, well, I could talk about this forever. The good news is we have 4 more sessions. So we will continue next week. Week 5 is about community. So that's partly about the grief that hits us all together. So some of it we've touched on this week a little bit, that collective grief that needs attention and healing in a little bit different way than our individual griefs do. That's where we're going next. So do join us again if you want to hop on live, so you get the benefit of being in the room, supporting us in the room, and also a little Q&A afterwards. It's 10 a.m. Pacific on Thursdays. And so we'd love to have you come back. We're moving another step out, community. We're seeing so much grief and pain there right now. It's a really important conversation. And I really, really hope that you'll join us.
So I want to leave everyone with our end of session reflection questions. So here's the question. How do you grieve when the person is still alive? We have one process for when we lose a loved one from death. But what do we do when it's the person who's still alive and we have to grieve the loss of that relationship? And then here's the second question. Does it sit differently in the body when the grief is with the loss of someone who is still alive?